All right, as I mentioned, these lessons or these lectures will be recorded, but I want to thank everyone who was able to show up today for our second week of our Intro to Cybersecurity series, hosted by the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley's Cybersecurity Club. For anyone who is new or watching this one for the first time, my name is Tyler Landgraf. I am the president of the Cybersecurity Club, and I am here with Miguel, who is our treasurer for our Cybersecurity Club. And we'll go ahead and proceed with today's lesson. So, as of last week, we did discuss the CIA triad. For the people who were here last week, can you annotate or put in the chat or state what that CIA triad stands for? I'll give it like a couple minutes here. And of course, the CIA doesn't stand for Central Intelligence Agency. That's fine if no one remembers, because we'll be going into more depth. Oh, okay. Yes, MAC, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So, really quickly, cybersecurity, definition of it, the practice of protecting systems against unauthorized access or attacks. Or another way of putting it, cybersecurity also involves protecting information by preventing, detecting, and responding to cyber attacks. And with that, we have the CIA triad. The CIA triad, of course, as we mentioned previously, was confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and is the fundamental model for the foundation in developing security policies for protecting data. So going in a bit deeper into the CIA triad, we'll start with confidentiality. So confidentiality, so what do we think when we hear confidentiality? We think of secrets, maybe even top secret, because you know how you would see confidential top secret stuff on like FBI secret files. But just to put it straightforward, that confidentiality references only the intended user has access to the data. And with the help of my Security Plus book that I use, we have a bit more context for that. Let's go ahead and flip to it. Let's see. Yeah, confidentiality just prevents the unauthorized disclosure of data, and of course, authorized personnel can access the data, but unauthorized personnel cannot. Of course, ensuring confidentiality uses several methods. We have here encryption and access control. A little bit about encryption. Of course, it just scrambles data, makes it unreadable for unauthorized personnel. There's different methods to doing so. As of right now, we have something called the AES, which is Advanced Encryption Standards. We'll go into that later. But the other one is access control, where we'll use identification, authentication, and authorization to make sure that those intended users have access to that data. All right, and before we continue to our next point, let me go ahead and show you a little example. As of right now, we are in our Outlook. This is the one provided by the university. And I want to show you a feature that actually is pretty useful, especially when it comes to certain documents that you would consider confidential. Because as of right now, when you send an email, it goes through the internet, which was not built for security, which is built as a means for communication. We have different protocols like TLS that will encrypt the data that goes through it, but the email itself is not encrypted. So if I go ahead and type in a new email, or go ahead and create a new email here, I'll just go ahead and send one to Miguel here. We'll just do it as the example, top secret. And our message will be, say, top secret message. And normally you would just send this. Apparently, well, not apparently, but I do want to showcase that because it's not encrypted yet, we can actually just simply check off a box that will encrypt it. If we go to these bottom three buttons, little dots here, it actually will allow you to encrypt it. It's just a simple button. Once you've clicked it, it'll say that it's encrypted, the message is encrypted, recipients can't remove encryption. So you can send this with confidence that the information will only be for that intended user, as we mentioned previously. Another extra bonus for the encryption feature on Outlook through the university is that you can change permissions, or if you don't want to, you can just remove it. But with changing permissions, you have just your basic encryptions. You also have do not forward. So if you want them to not forward that to anyone, of course, it's straightforward. And then UTRGV has these other confidential options. This is just a labeling system here for confidential. I'm not too familiar with specifics of it, but another nice one is confidential view only. This option here, of course, would allow you to prevent someone from modifying your message, which we'll get to in a minute on integrity. But let's just go, for example, let's just pick one of these. Like, okay, I have a message from Cybersecurity. It's just saying that we have a Monday mix. Hi, Tyler, blah, 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 blah. And if I decided to, I could forward this to Miguel if I needed to. It's like, hey, man, we got some Cyber Monday going on here. But if I wanted to, I could actually go down here and just change anything I wanted to. So instead of Phillips Amen, I can put my name. Oh, look at me. Now I'm in here. And then that would disrupt the integrity of this message. So of course, those other features are really nice, especially when working with confidential information, whether you're working with a department here at the university or whichever company you work for in the future, or just personal use. You can send information to a family member that you just want to make sure it's only them. All right. Let me go ahead and discard this graph. And I can definitely send this message. I'll just send it anyways. And so it's sent. So it's this message is encrypted. What's encrypted? What's encrypted? And then it'll give you more information on what it does. So these are very helpful options. And it's not just for Outlook. It's also for Chrome. It's also for Yahoo, I assume. I haven't checked the Yahoo one, but Google has their own encryption as well as an option. Aside from that, let me go ahead and move on to the next slide, which we have here. But before I do, does anyone have any questions on confidentiality or any questions regarding emails or anything like that? You can open your mic or just text in the chat. If not, you can go ahead and move on. Right. All right, so our next topic, our next topic will be integrity. Of course, integrity provides assurance that the data has not been changed, which we alluded to previously. And a way that we can do this is with hashing. Hashing is simply a number that's created by executing a hashing algorithm against it, or the data, such as a file or a message. And this is normally written in hexadecimal. We won't go into too much detail on how this works, but I will let you know that it's very useful for when you're downloading a file off the internet. I have an example here to show you, but because of the nature of Kali Linux, the university categorizes this as a hacking website, which is reasonable because Kali has a lot of digital forensics tools that it could use to scan a network, let's see, what was the one for the disks?
Callie, you have image acquisition,
Image acquisitioning.
uh,
So a lot of extra feature.
open network protocols.
Yeah, so this can do a lot, but the point that I was going to show is that this website and many others have right beside the download button, a button that says some. And this would be the, most cases it's SHA, which is that secure hashing algorithm that we discussed in the slide. What was that?
The checksum.
Yes, and we have the checksum. What happens is that, so this is that Kali Linux VirtualBox download that I had on my computer. At least I have this to show. But running the SHA 256-bit algorithm gives me this long string. And on the website, it shows the exact same number. This right here that you're seeing on my screen is just a hashing calculator that I have downloaded on my computer. They're normally free. I think the Microsoft store had, or this came directly from the Microsoft store. But these are very crucial when you're dealing with files that are questionable. But if you have downloaded a questionable file, you can always upload it, or a link to it if you're not confident in downloading it. You can go to this website that we all use here, VirusTotal. So this website is super useful. If you want, please write it down. It's virustotal.com, where if you're questionable, or if a file is questionable on your desktop, you can choose the file. It also gives you the option to simply paste the URL. It'll scan that URL for any malicious code or any malicious software. Well, maybe I'll put that in the chat for y'all to look at.
I'm sure it's similar to the way that like normal virus detection programs, antivirus.
Oh
They
yeah.
probably use the same procedure, but the back end,
Oh yeah. A nice thing about VirusTotal is that it collects information from other,
It's like an aggregate.
other virus scanning or malware scanning tools like Norton, Malwarebytes, all of that. And the third option we have is search. So simply we can do utrgb.edu, and we can see that, of course, thank God, it's clean. But it did say that one detected communication with this domain. So it does say that it's 0 out of 94, and it scanned, not scanned, but it's referencing all of these different companies that scan and report malicious software or code. So as of right now, we're in the green, so that's good to see. Of course, I have also an example for Kali, which is also a little alarming, because there is one saying, it says one security vendor flagged this URL as malicious, which, much like the university here, that's understandable, because people can use Kali in a malicious way. But this is not saying that the file is going to put your computer on a botnet or start scanning you or put a Trojan on your computer. But it is, let's see, what was that? But it's just saying that it's, but if there are more red ones, then it is questionable. So we would probably refer back to the hash on that one. But one other thing about the VirusTotal is that you can put this hash in that search bar, and it should show the exact information, because the unique thing about hashing is that the bigger the algorithm is, this SHA-256, there's no room for what we call collision. Collision meaning that if I run this hashing algorithm on my name, Tyler, and I ran it on Miguel's name, they'll come out as two different names. But if our if our algorithm isn't that strong, there is a slight possibility that we would share the same hash algorithm. So that's why we're getting more advanced to the SHA-512 bit moving forward. But as of right now, I believe SHA-256 is the standard. MD5 was deprecated. A lot of websites still use it, but not in a sense of high security, I've noticed. So you're not going to see Kali using MD5. MD5 was like the first one. It was Message Digest 5, which this book also references. Let's see, one second here. Okay, we can move on. Does anyone have any questions or concerns or anything about
What do the details say on the virus total?
for which one?
On that malicious,
Oh, you mean this one?
yeah,
I did look up what CRDF was, because that is the security vendor's name, but it didn't really give me much information in regarding who they were as a company, CRDF. Because we get Yahoo Finance or
because the last time I saw that detail page, I think it feeds off from the what's it called? Top, like I guess the header. on the file.
yeah.
And so it compares that value to what it knows, and it spits out whatever that category is. Like, is it a file? Is it a website? Is it such and such?
Yeah, and much like the intrusion detections, they normally just scan the top or the header, like you're referencing, but normally since we send messages encrypted, we can only read that header. Some more advanced technologies will actually dig through the message and check for malicious code or malicious hashing.
If it's not encrypted.
If it's not encrypted, yeah. That's where like an intrusion prevention system comes into play, but we'll discuss that in a later date. Let's see. Are we on time? Oh, we're really 25. Okay. All right. Aside from that, let's see. Just make sure. Okay. So the next point, because we're already finished with our CIA triad. Let's see. Actually, no, we're not. One more. We do have availability as our last point on the CIA triad acronym. Of course, the availability just deals with preventing disruptions of the service and productivity. And this can be accomplished with redundancy. A lot of companies have redundancy. Like with my internship, we had 2 on-site locations for our data centers. We had one downtown and another at the downtown area. Still in the same city though, which is surprising, but then again, it is a private company. But other companies like Google, Amazon, they have this redundancy across the United States and even the world. So you know that you'll have that availability 24/7. And there's some other, let me just make sure. Yeah, just ensuring that the systems are up and operational when needed. It's often a single, and often addresses those single points of failure. Single points of failure, we're crucial, or it's crucial that we reduce the amount of single points of failure to elevate the availability for a service or your data. Like we all use online storage as a service. We have Google Drive, we have, the university has the OneDrive from Microsoft. And for the most part, I have never seen them go down. So they definitely have good availability and have removed a lot of their points of failure. But we do this by adding fault tolerance and redundancies that I mentioned. Like when it comes to hard drives on a computer, you can have multiple ones and have them redundancy. So you can have your own type of redundancy with raids. See, server redundancies. So yeah, there's different types. There's disk redundancies, like I mentioned, server redundancies, as we were talking about different companies having their data centers displayed everywhere, and network redundancies. So we have like load balancing. So the Ethernet cable that's plugged in your computer, we have multiple ones of those on servers. So that will help with the uptime. And even if one goes down, we can just replace it while the other one takes care of it. And then lastly, we have power redundancies, what we call UPS systems. So an uninterrupted power supplies, just of course, as I mentioned, as the name says, would provide power to key systems for like commercial use for data centers. Let's see. All right. So moving on, the CIA triad, why do we do it? Of course, alluding back to all the things I've said before, this would provide a high-level checklist so we can make sure that we're doing everything in our power to provide the confidentiality, integrity, and availability for our customers. And of course, making it for an effective system with for preventing, detecting, and responding to those cyber attacks if necessary. When do we use it? Of course, CIA triad is used in a majority of security situations. Any little thing that you can think of, it has one or more of these acronyms for CIA handled or taken care of. Data classification, whether this is confidential or not, managing permissions, when we, much like, for an example here, Miguel and I actually have permissions to use this classroom here at the university, while other students do not. But of course, our reason for that is so we can post these informative lectures. And then lastly, access privileges pertains to the files themselves. So we'll go over that in just a minute, but it's read permissions, write permissions, and execute permissions. And then we have different areas that they apply to. But moving on, well, of course, that will wrap up our CIA triad. But before we continue with our AAA acronym, does anyone have any questions on availability or any other points or points on the CIA triad? It's all right if we don't. Hoping that I am thorough with everything. But obviously no questions means a good thing. Just checking my battery on my computer because this power outlet is not working. Okay, moving on, we have the AAA. And so the AAA stands for authentication, authorization, and accountability. It kind of goes off of what CIA does in a sense, but in a more managed way. Let's see. Of course, the authentication, authorization, and accounting work together with identification, provide a comprehensive access management system. So let's see, for identification, we have claiming the identity with a username. But then we have, authentication, which would provide identity, approving identity, such as a password, their credentials. And we have these things called authentication factors, which are something you know, something you have, and something you are. And I don't know if you have kind of gotten this yet, but just looking at the factors, something you know, something you have, something you are, that plays into the two-factor or multi-factor authentication. So we'll go over that towards the end in more detail, because there's a lot. There's more than just something you have, something you know, and something you are. There's also somewhere you are. other ones. But that leads us to our authorization. So authorization is providing access to those resources, whether that is granting and limiting access, and those permissions we mentioned before, read, write, execute. And this is based on their proven identity. Here, I believe there was an example. All right, something popped up on the screen there. Okay, I'm just making sure I didn't have anything else to say about this, but aside from that, let's see. Then we have the accounting, which is the more business side of anything, because this provides tracking user activity for businesses that use that authentication and authorization for logging in to accounts. So they have activity logs, and with those activity logs, they can provide billing information for their users. I mean, of course, they can be free, but a lot of times they can cost. Like as of right now, Lex, who's in the room with us today, and I are currently in Dr. Q's cloud computing class. And thankfully, with Google Cloud, we're actually able to use their services for free for a time. They do have a billing section there that provides up to $300 worth of service, or up to 90 days of using their services within that $300 price. And with that, they can track how often they used it, what are they using it for, and then this is where other things like advertisements come in, but that's something completely different. This is a means so that you can track user activity, of course. Let's see. All right, does anyone have any questions on the AAA, authentication, authorization, and accounting?
You remind me to go check my machines real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure.
We did have that class earlier today and for a lab test, I guess you could say. And I had to also make sure that my instances were removed, because they do charge you per day, at least with the minimum, like 2 virtual CPUs and 4 gigs of RAM. It's only like 4 cents a day. So you can run a computer all month if you want to and not really break the bank, at least with that $300 budget.
Now that I know how to make them, I started deleting them, like just delete the whole VM.
Well, yeah, and at least we have those templates now. At least we also have templates, so if we do want to just quickly start one up, we can just do that.
It would be exactly how we set it up, so it's.
Yeah, as long as you didn't have files saved onto it.
Yeah.
All right. Aside from that, go ahead, check here. So I guess we don't have any questions in regarding the AAA.
Well, the accounting, actually, I did have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Accountability, right? Is that the
Yes.
same as accounting?
Accountability.
Third one, right?
Accounting is
Is it accounting or accountability?
no accounting. Because accountability has a different meaning. Accountability is more so on a sense of granting permissions, much like how how we had it for authorization. Like you were authorized to use this program, you're authorized to write, read, or execute this file.
In logging, you would find out if someone's trying to gain access to places they're not supposed to.
Oh, yes,
right?
yeah, there's that too. And of course, the accounting, I guess you can say, holds an accountability for that person's permissions and allows the company to limit that if necessary. Because of course, if they're going beyond the means of their permissions or authorization, then something else is happening there, either being hacked or there's some other malicious activity may be happening.
But that one's probably the one that people our companies are least interested in, because they might not be aware of it, or not aware, but very good at it. Everyone's good at the authentication and authorization. But going back and researching, and you'd have to hire a cyber analyst to be able to look into that.
Yeah, there's always that balance between what's profitable, what's effective and efficient. Well, effective and efficient would be just like what's easier for them, because a lot of business people just whatever makes me money, whatever is easier, and a lot of it. This also alludes to passwords, which I wanted just to interject because username and passwords, alluding back to. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong section right now. Authentication for username and passwords. A lot of the time, passwords can be socially engineered out of someone. So a good example that Dr. Q gave me was that I believe it was a relative, or maybe it was someone he knew, but they had their first name, last name, and their date of birth as their username. And that's kind of all the information you need to start figuring someone out. And then of course, passwords, we normally have it as like a relative or our pet's name or something that we're more familiar with that might be associated with a one of those questions and regarding like who you are when you set up a password for an account. So if they can socially engineer that out of you, then they have everything that they need to access your account. So that this little segue though, I just want to make sure that everyone's aware, just to be aware of the password you use. If you repeatedly use those same passwords, try to update them as frequently as possible, not frequently as possible, but change them amongst the different accounts, just in case one account gets hacked. You don't have to worry too much about the other ones. You can use account password logging apps like One Login or LastPass, and those will allow you to have more secure passwords with just one master password. Of course, you need to make sure you remember the master password and make sure it's sufficient. Because one of the things that we have in here in this book is password complexity. Of course, you have 26 uppercase, 26 lowercase, there's 10 numbers, and these special characters. And that kind of pertains to what I did over the summer, being a PCI audit security analyst. PCI is just payment card industry, and they do have a framework for what's recommended for passwords, which is kind of interesting to read about because they're even go into examples and explaining that the 60-day or 90-day password changes are not really effective, because if someone can figure out a previous password, normally they can just go through the forgot password flow and then just retrieve a password, because normally sometimes they ask you like, what was one of your previous passwords? So if they know that, then that's another way of getting in. So of course, they just recommend that you make a long password that uses those 4 characteristics, being uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and special characters. You can replace vowels with numbers, letters with numbers in general, or with special characters to make it more complex. But move back to our lesson here. But did anyone have any questions on that though? Because I know I probably should talk about this when we're on the authentication page.
The one thing that I have seen as far as that is the use of hardware devices, kind of like dumb devices, to people are not good at passwords, and something that you would have to actually plug into your computer to a USB drive.
Yeah.
And that might have like a separate,
I get you. Yeah, this one actually going to that brings us to our last slide here on comparing authentication factors. These are the authentication metrics to which we can go off of to have two-factor and multi-factor authentication. Of course, we'll start with something you know, which is your password, as I mentioned, those upper, lower case numbers, special characters, or a PIN. But I do want to also disclose at the beginning that multi-factor or two-factor does not mean two of the same or two or more of the same type. So you can't have a password and a PIN and expect it to be multi-factor or two-factor. You do have to have one of something you know and another one from the list below. So aside from something you know, is something you have. And much like Alex was alluding to, we have those token keys. They can be a physical USB fob that you plug in your computer, and that will be your means of second authentication, something you have. It can be a smart card where you can just tap a panel and it will unlock a door. Then we have HOTP and TOTP. These are, so I know that TOTP is time-based temporary password.
Right, post one time.
Oh yeah, it was, let's see. Oh, time-based one-time password. It uses like a timestamp instead of a counter because HOTP is the hash-based one-time password. So that one will just generate a password for you, but it stays on there, or like the next one will come up and it'll stay on there whenever it's ready. But if someone can access that, that's already considered a, what's it called?
So the first one, they send you a code, right?
Yeah.
The second one, it's you log it in within that specific time with the code.
Yeah, they both do the same thing. It's just that it depends on, the only difference is when is it given? So the HOTP is once you use that one password, the next one's already generated and it could be available for months at a time even. But time-based one-time password is whenever you request it, it gives it. And it doesn't, and it just throws it away once it's done. And that's what a lot of current authentication apps use. Much like our Microsoft authentication app that we use for the school, Google authentication apps, but they all have their own different algorithms for it. Most of them are open source. And then we have, of course, the two-step verification with like a short SMS to send you a PIN. That proves that you have a phone. Something you are and allude to fingerprints, vein, retina, iris, facial, voice, and gait analysis. I was confused about gait analysis. But then someone pointed out, oh, that's just the way you walk. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I've never heard of something you are authentication being just the way you walk. And that's actually pretty neat to see and hear about. There are also a difference between retina and iris. The retina one can scan one of both eyes for the blood vessels at the back of your eye for recognition, while the iris uses just the pattern in your iris or pupil for recognition. So I thought that was really interesting too. Vein being, you can just present your arm and or your hand, and it will map out where your veins are. And that will be your type of fingerprint. So these are really interesting, and I believe they may have more.
The gate one's fascinating because they use that like an intel when you go into their production plants to actually authenticate who you are they have like a bubble that you go into. Only one person can be in there at a time.
I think the only issue with gait analysis is that what if you hurt yourself and then you start walking with a limp? It's like, well, now we got to authenticate you.
Yeah, you probably have to reset the authentication.
Yeah. So that's the only drawback of gait analysis. While the other ones like iris, retina, fingerprint, vein, facial, and those at least, they don't really change. Of course, somewhere you are, would include internet protocol IP addresses for geolocation. This can be done with your phone or simply just whichever computer you're connected to. This is good for geotagging and geofencing. Geofencing would refer to, I only want people to access data from this database within less than 1 mile of the building. So once someone leaves the building or goes down the street, they no longer have access, even if they have mobile access to it, because it'll depend on your geotagging. But that also alludes to the use of VPNs. You can spoof where you are in the world with the VPN. So that's why when I use a VPN, sometimes I have to be aware of what websites I'm accessing, most like Discord, because they will recognize a different IP address and warn you that, hey, I don't think this is legit. We'll send you an email just to confirm. And of course, I always have to make sure I have my email open and ready when using my VPNs. And then lastly, we just have something you do. This can be picture passwords being the I am not a robot, or other gestures that your phone may ask you to prompt you. I haven't seen too many of those, but we all recognize and remember the I am not a robot and patterns where it's like, oh, select the tiles that
Captures.
yeah, select the tiles that pertain or that contain a light. And it's like or intersection light or whatnot. And it's just like when you click on it, they don't work. I was like, oh, I hate those, but they work. Let's see. But aside from that, there are other ones on the list. I just didn't want to flood this this slide here with different things. But aside from what you can do, there's also something you can exhibit, referring to something that you can show or display, like a document or evidence item submitted, attempting to prove or disprove something, like my insurance, picture of my insurance or something. There's also someone you know. So knowing that one person can get you through the door, basically. So they can vouch for you, really. You seen any other ones? It's just those two that were kind of off to the side that were interesting to know about, but we focus mostly on these 5. But aside from that, we don't have any other material to show y'all.
What's weird is that multi-factor is getting more multi. Like we started at dual authentication,
Oh yeah.
and now it's going to multi-factor authentication.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised if the 4th is one that you yourself put on top of this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's why after 2-factor, they just end up saying multi-factor, because you can have more than just the 2. You can actually have all 5 if you really want to make sure that you're secure with giving someone authentication for entry to a building or access to files.
This is just the logical sense.
Yeah.
Not even looking at the physical sense of access, like when you get to an organization.
Oh yeah.
The gates, the guards, the keys, the
Oh,
locks.
definitely. Yeah, there's a lot more that goes into it. Of course, we only have an hour.
You're like a layer 10 security.
Yeah, there's so many different authentication factors and means of security. As Alex was alluding to, being physical security, locks, guards, man traps, and the likes. But aside from that, did anyone have any other further questions for me today? Otherwise, we can wrap up the lecture today.
That's good. Interesting. HOTP. What's the exact name?
So
Hashed one-time password.
yeah, so the H stands for hash-based message authentication code, HMAC. But to go into detail, that would require another class. So an HMAC-based one-time password. So
HashMac.
yeah, So it's like the counter iteration, so just change everything every time that, like, here's one, okay, now here's 2, 3, and it keeps going, but it's consistently showing and being available. While the TOTP is that time-based one-time password, so it's like, I want it, I only want it now for the next 30 seconds, and that's it.
So QB, we had a token was called a Duo, that company.
Okay, yeah, do it.
And it was, I didn't know what, I thought it was like cell based or something, but now it's like a digital watch, like those ones you buy for $5.
Okay,
And they have a code, and that code is based on a code that's within it that multiplies it by the time of day that was synchronized with the server. So you always have that, and you have to throw them away after like 2 years because the synchronization goes past the 30 seconds.
okay.
And they only have like a 30-second to a minute availability. So after a while, you can't just go back to the server and link them. So you have to get new ones. So they have a time limit.
All right, so I think I've seen those. I think they also have. That's the
So
right
once that
time.
passes, when you press on it, and then it gives you a 6-digit code, you plug it in, and it lets you in.
That's neat. All right. Well, I don't see anyone asking questions on the chat or anyone have their mic open, but I'll go ahead and stop the recording.